This is our office's final event due to budget cuts at the university. I want to take the time to thank some staff, past and present, who are here tonight, who really have been the heartbeat of the office. Julia Aoki, Kathy Feng, Sam Walters, Joey Malbon, Andrea Creamer, who was the first person to work in the office, amazing work. Fiorella Pinillos, Melissa Roach, Aaliyah Bardi, and Samad Jaffer, who's doing her PhD in Yale. There's many, many more people as well. There'll be plenty of time for thank yous. And since the announcement of the closure of our office, we've had so many expressions of love and solidarity from the neighborhood, the university community, the School for Contemporary Arts, and collaborators nationally and internationally. It's truly been overwhelming. We couldn't have existed all these years without that love and support, and no matter what the future holds in these troubled political times, we're committed to this work, and we're really proud of what we were able to do the past 14 years in this complex political environment, in this neighborhood, in this university, in the city that we live in. And it's fitting that we have Lizzie Borden in person. I'm such a fan of her work. Had a chance to interview her for the podcast a few years ago. Just emailed her out of the blue, and just been so generous to get to know you. She's, of course, director of the film we'll be watching tonight, but she also went to art school at Wesley College in Massachusetts before moving to New York. She's really the living legend, so I'm going to get out of the way here just to say, please welcome Lizzie Borden.
Wow. Thank you so much for coming. I am so thrilled to be in Vancouver for the first time. After one day here, I may move here, considering what's going on south of the border. But I'm really honored to be the last guest, but hopefully not, because getting to know Am for years and his brilliance and kindness and the program, and it just feels like such a sad occasion, actually, to be here if this is the last one. And hopefully there will be a reversal in some ways with everyone writing in and protesting this very unfair cut. It's just not right, and so anything I can do, please let me know. But I am thrilled to be presenting Born in Flames here, and you know, I intended this film to be an activist film in a time when things were not as bad as they are now, but were bad. Not because of the president, but because the message was to New York City, drop dead. And everything seemed to be under attack. And I wanted to make a film that asked a lot of questions. It didn't have the answers, but by the end is a question mark that at the end, that hopefully would send people out of the cinema asking, what should we do? And is this right? And is this the right way to go? It took about 7 years to make. I wanted to engage women to be in the film who would create their own parts and create their own voices. And it was very difficult finding women who would stay the distance. But it was extraordinary to find them and to work with them, especially civil rights activist Flo Kennedy. I mean, I have no idea why she said yes. She's the elder in this film, and her sayings are her own. And I was always shocked whenever she opened her mouth. But she trusted us to do this. It was 2 years into the making of the film before I found the narrative of the film. but I would shoot once a month and then edit maybe 7 or 8 hours a day. And it was through the editing and through finding elements that created the propulsion. There are documentary aspects of it, and I use some documentary elements and some found footage, but it's not a documentary, and there are some fiction elements. But I don't want to talk too much about it beforehand, but I do promise to answer any questions afterwards. And any questions you don't get to ask me tonight, if it gets too late, you can write to me at Lizzie Borden LA on X or Twitter, but soon because I'm going to Blue Sky. I don't know where to go. I need advice, please tell me. The ship is sinking, and this one too, so we all have to band together and do something fast. So yes, ask me any questions afterwards, and again, thank you for being here.
Wake up! Wake up!
So great to be up here with you, Lizzie, and so wonderful to have you here in Vancouver. It's just such an honor.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah. I'm just going to ask one question because the fire alarm threw our timing out to get to the reception. We'll open it up to questions for the audience after. But I'm just going to start with, Lizzie, what led up to the making of the film. You, of course, went to art school rather than film school. You had done an earlier film called Regrouping. But if you can sort of walk us through that time period, because you spent something like 7 years editing it.
Right. Yes, I wanted to be a painter. And I knew everything about art history. And I realized through that, and also by writing art reviews for Art Forum magazine, kind of by accident, when I was really young, that I knew too much about painting because there was a little critic on me that kept judging me and saying, this sucks, this is like totally derivative. But I had access to, through Art Forum, I had access to really major artists. And I saw their artwork in galleries, and I saw their films, like Richard Serra and Vito Acconci, and Joan Jonas, who did video more than film. And I was really struck by it, and it's how it worked in film spaces. But I started out making my first film with 4 women from the School of Visual Arts because this feminism was sweeping through the art world because men really dominated the art spaces, and they still do for the most part in terms of museums. And men were protesting that, but women were really treated secondarily. And a lot of the women whose work I was really interested in, like women who did body performance art, were sort of not seen as treated seriously, even though someone like Vito Acconci, who used his body, in pieces like Seedbed, where he was underneath the platform and jerking off, that was treated very serious, a serious piece of work, and it was. But why women, like Hannah Wilke, who put gum all over her body, or Carly Schneemann, who pulled a scroll, out of her, whatever, it's, why weren't they treated as equal in stature? So these women were doing feminist talks, and I thought this will be interesting if I follow them and I see what they're doing. But I never intended to do a regular documentary. I always wanted it to be like the films I saw in gallery spaces. So I started that way, but I very soon ran into an obstacle, which is that they felt I was an outsider to the group and they wouldn't let me see anything. So as much as I tried to break in, the harder they would keep me out. But I was the producer because I had $3,000 from Saul LeWitt to make this film, so I felt I have to finish. But as I decided, okay, I will be the enemy and I will finish this, but I will make it a critique of groups. So I put together a second group 10 years older, which included Barbara Kruger, who said, yes, she wasn't as famous, obviously, as she became, sort of critiquing that kind of group that felt more like a consciousness-raising group, even though it was a feminist group, and validated groups in terms of being for some kind of action or political movement. But I realized through the making of that group that all the women were white, and that most of the people I knew below, let's say, 14th Street were white in the art world. I mean, this was pre-Basquiat, and even he suffered some of that. There were maybe 3 black female artists, and I had met them, but they didn't really live downtown. They weren't part of the scene. And I really wanted to do something that, first of all, where I worked with each woman in a very collaborative way, where each woman would create her own character, and which was much more intersectional in terms of intersectional in the sense that the women I worked with in the first film they all were able to go to art school. You know, they were all able to afford it. And the women I wanted to work with, I wanted them to be, yes, from all strata of culture. And I just set one intention, which was to set it 10 years after a social democratic cultural revolution in the United States. And by that, it was meant to be anywhere in a kind of imaginary that was some kind of revolution that would have put women in second place. I had been reading, in the art world, there was a group called Art Language, and they were reading a lot of Marxist texts. And I wasn't part of it, but I was adjacent to it, and I was really fascinated by the woman question. Like, what is the woman question? Does it mean that women are a question to be resolved after everything else is resolved? So I thought, well, that should be the premise. And who among women would be the most at risk? So I thought, well, women of color and women who sort of pushed, who are more daring, or sort of pushed the line in terms of sexuality, like gay women. And, I think some of the women who were in the film would have been trans, but that wasn't really an option then. There was Christine Jorgensen, but, it wasn't an option the way it is today. And the women I'm thinking of all had male-female names. And I look at them today when I see the film and I think, she would have, and she would have. And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to push back against regrouping, although I learned a lot in regrouping in terms of a technique I wanted to use, which was to stack sound so that you could be listening to one thing or another thing. So more than one track was playing at one time. So in Born in Flames, it was, if you didn't want to listen to a boring speech, you could listen to the sound behind it. You could just tune out. So, that is all part of this symphonic idea of when you go into an art gallery, and sometimes there's a lot of things to see, and sometimes there are monitors playing different things at the same time. I wanted more of that experience, but on a flat screen. So that's I'm sorry, I pivoted here and there.
Yeah. I'll just do one last follow-up question before we go to the audience, which is just working with such a tight budget, working with non-actors, non-professional actors. Can you just share a little bit about that part of the process of making the work?
It was real. They were just real. Sometimes it took a lot of attempting to have them even be natural in front of a camera. Honey, for example, it took a really long time. She was really nervous before she settled into her character, and very often it was hard to do anything but improvise. But sometimes we had to then do a script. Like some of the scenes were done and then rewritten and then done again. The non-actors were one thing, and then there were some performers. Because downtown, the thing about the 80s downtown is that there was everybody. There were musicians, there were theater people, there were painters, there were everyone, and everyone collaborated on everything. So there were some people who came from theater, like Ron Votter he played one of the FBI agents, and Adele Berthet, who was Radio Ragazza, was a punk rock performer. So she was totally comfortable in front of the camera. And Flo Kennedy, when she said stuff like, oh, which would you rather see come through the door, one lion or, 5,000 mice, 500 mice? That was one of her sayings, or we have the right to violence. It's like the right to pee. Those were her sayings. She'd been in front of so many cameras. So it was really all about that. And then also my process of editing was edit around the bad stuff, put in the good stuff, play music really loud behind the stuff that really sucked. Sometimes they were so drunk, and as many times as I did it, they would still be drunk. Sometimes I used to have, and the problem over 5 years is people's hair grows, and that's why a lot of people are wearing hats, because over 5 years, Honey liked to shave her head. That was her thing, shave her head and wear a thing around it. It was so, okay, she shaves her head, she has to wear a hat, it was just, that's what, one has to do. But for me, it was more important to have a raw energy. The raw energy was more important than acting performance, is to have a real sense about it. So it was more important that the women in it feel comfortable. It's some of it was actually planned out like a mini, like Hollywood movie, like the bicycle brigade thing, which was my favorite scene because I wish it would happen. I wish that there were women stashed away everywhere. So if there was a rape going on, they would just appear, all over, and but that had to be planned out, like where, like more than one camera was, where the women would be, how they would come out, how it would be shot, and stealing of the U-Haul trucks, same thing. We had to plan it all out. We had to have more than one camera, but we shot with short ends, that's how we did it for very little money. There was a guy who sold short ends. That's how we were able to afford not having any money. I only had a little money at one time to be able to shoot, and then I was running all over the city, and I always had an old Lincoln Continental or Cadillac, and I had a fake film permit, so I always parked it in the street, and that they weren't so smart back then, It's like, oh, it's a film permit. And if anybody stopped us, like in the airport, you just, oh, I'm a student, and didn't matter how old people looked. It was like, yeah, I'm a student, I'm an NYU, and they're like, okay, just don't stay too long. Now, forget it. It wouldn't work. But yeah, it was, sometimes like the one professional actor, Eric Bogosian, complained, wow, I'm just here so long for one line. This is, I think, one of his first movies. But I think if he'd been a non-actor, he wouldn't have complained so much, You'd just get him lunch and he'd be fine.
Okay, we're going to open it up to questions. We've got a microphone that's going around. Just pop your hand up and we'll get the microphone to you. I can sort of see there's a question right in the middle there.
I'm really nervous to ask a question, and especially the first one.
Oh, no, don't be.
I can't help it. I had so much caffeine today. I just want to start by saying thank you so much for sharing that with us tonight, and thank you for making it, even though like such a long time ago, it was so contemporary, which is kind of unsettling, but we live in unsettling times. I have so many. I haven't been to this theater much, but it's like the university, so they have a little desk. I was like, oh, I'll write some notes so I have a good question. And now I'm just, okay. I wanted to say, since I'm here, I'll be sincere. And that's the only poetry I'll say, but with that, the land we're at, where we're occupying, it feels like so much pain and like this violence, this genocide that we live through, that we witness. And it just feels so... I was gonna ask a question about inconvenience and how you said it took 7 years to make this movie, so that meant it must have been really inconvenient to make that. And okay, I'm trying to think of what, I have too many questions, I'm sorry.
If you could get to a question, because we do want to get to some more, please.
Yeah, how inconvenient, like how did you work through the inconvenience to create this art?
You know, first of all, I want to say I never expected it to be relevant today. And to me, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that it is, and things are even worse. I did not expect there to be the same issues for women or for people. And it wasn't inconvenient at all for me. It was, I felt powerful making it. I didn't know that it would turn into a movie. I didn't even know who it was for. I just know that the act of editing for me felt powerful every time I made a splice in the film, because in the old days, I worked in film and I worked on what was called a Steenbeck. It was a flatbed, and cutting and putting the film together and seeing it time and time again felt like, it felt as if it was the most convenient thing I could be doing, because I ask myself now, you know, what can I be doing? You know, I'm going back, I've already joined Indivisible, I'm thinking, what can I do? What can I do to try to, what can I do? What can I do if there is no mifepristone available? How can I help? What can one person do? But one person can do a lot, you know? So I was only distressed in the first 2 years when I didn't know if I had a film. And I made the mistake of showing it to a couple of men, Sylvain L'Étranger for one, who said it was awful. And, you know, I wanted to give up, and then I didn't. So I persisted. And that to me was an act of, it was my life, and it was my passion. And I feel like so many, how many of you have made films or made, you know, or even created something you put in the world, an essay, like a film, a video? Some of you, yes. Yes. It feels you've done something, you've put something in the world, you've changed the world just by putting something out. And there's something so satisfying about doing that. And if other people read it, see it, have a conversation about it, it's the most incredible thing in the world. And for me right now, it's the most extraordinary thing to have you here today, tonight, because I am so distressed about what's happening in the world, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in the United States every day, what's happening with the end of U.S. aid, what's happening, I mean, in this country, reading about it. I mean, I was shocked to find out that the Proud Boys was a Canadian, that the guy who started Proud Boys. I thought, what the hell? You know, it's like a Canadian? It's like, I love Canadians. I have my best friend in LA is a Canadian. It's so yes, it was the most convenient thing I could be doing then, and I wish I were doing right at this moment. Yeah, but thank you for your question. I know it's hard to ask.
We have a question on this side over here. Go ahead, Kathy, just over. Right.
We have another.
Oh, another one? Oh, sorry. I can't see, so yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Just wondering what your team and the actors thought of the piece, as much as you might know, and are you still in contact with any of them now?
Yeah, the sad thing is that some of them have passed, have died. Honey is no longer with us, and some of the woman who plays Adelaide Norris, I keep in touch with from time to time. She's not well. She lives in Boston. She's very ill, and I'm very close to Adele, who played, Isabel from Radio Ragazza. She lives in LA, and she's a writer. And Saturday, there's a book release of her latest book, which is about Sinead O'Connor, and she's passionate, and she's an activist, and she is still performing when people can convince her to get on the stage. She's still got a great voice, but I see her, but some of the others have scattered to various cities. So at one point I tried to bring everyone together in like 2016 when the film was restored, but I could reach very few of them. I did see Jeannie, who played Adelaide Norris. She did come to New York. She was well then, and that was extraordinary. But I think they're really proud of it. They're really proud of it, and they feel that they put so much of themselves in it, so that's what they're proud of too, and they're proud of what it says, or proud of what it's. By the time it was done, they had, well, some of them, like Adele, always had the feeling of what the film was about, and that's why she wanted to do it. Some of the others came to believe in it. Like, for example, Jeannie, who plays Adelaide Norris, I met her because I saw her playing basketball at the at the YMCA Y in New York. And I just thought she looks interesting. I'm going to ask her if she'll be in this film. Because so many women said no. But she said, oh, let me check it out. I'll check it out. I'll come and talk to you and see some footage. And she said yes. And I was shocked. And she stuck with it. It was amazing. So, and Honey, same thing. I had gone into a lesbian bar, met the woman who said, the army is not mature enough to hang out with me. And so she was no way. But her roommate was Honey, who called herself a singing evangelist. And she was a real church person. And she said, yeah. And she hung around the whole time. And she had this very, very mystical quality. And she was proud. I wish she were around today. She would be very proud to see her face on social media. So yeah. But it's funny because when you do a film and your first screening is downtown on a pull-down screen, you don't know what it's going to be, and then it was invited to Berlin, and then it went to the Women's Film Festival, in France, and it kind of gained momentum. And through the years, it was different things. It's a different film over the years, and then I learn about it by showing it to different audiences. But thank you for your question.
I have a question on this side.
Hi there. Firstly, thank you so much for that. It felt so incredibly vital and important, and to just take in at this moment. So thank you for making it.
Oh, thank you.
I'm a community organizer, and I thought it was really interesting how much throughout the film there were so many shots of people talking, groups congregating, and then footage of protests and other parts of that. And in ways, some of the conversations in the film felt like a really quite strategic, quite tactical almost conversation about what is to be done. So I was just wondering if you could talk about the relationship of the movie and the process of making it to organizing, and that relationship.
Well, that's interesting because the big protests were going on, and some of them had gone on years before, and I got the footage from, the media. Some of them were going on, and I put some of the actors, Catherine Bigelow and Becky Johnston and Pat Murphy, into the big protests going on. Some of them were fake, like the secretary strike was a fake protest, and then real secretaries joined in. It was like, can I have a sign? I want to do that. And then the other unions were protesting, and I had, Honey go there. And so for me, it was really about protests. Really what the film was about was, how do you have your voice heard? Do you do pamphleting? And then you do radio, and then you do protests, and then you do bigger protests, and then none of that works. And if none of that works, and even like public television doesn't work, you have to then get, at that point, Zella Wiley is saying you have to find a way to blow out the regular media and get on the state media in order to get your message heard. and that's when violence is used. And then when they blow up not the whole World Trade Center, but it wasn't the whole way, it was just the transmission tower. It was really my question, the reason that's the last shot is, my question is what happens after the last shot? They're all arrested. You know, I was very influenced by the movie The Battle of Algiers, you know, because in that film, violence was necessary because waves and waves of generations of protesters would come in its wake, and finally freedom would be gained. In late stage capitalism, that would not work. You know, violence doesn't work in that way. And you know, Indivisible has said, for example, that we should not have a huge women's march because that would attract violence. That would attract, you know, all of the January 6th people, and then there would be a reason to send in the troops. You know, there should be pop-up violence, you know, pop-up protests here and there at the same time ahead of all that, you know, and that would work better. So there are different methods for different countries, and but so for me it was just a series of questions, hopefully to ask, for people to ask what is valid, what would one do at, you know, and just to send hopefully an audience out asking that question and feeling the urge to do something, you know, to do something. Yeah, it's like echoing the first question, which is just a feeling of anguish and frustration in a time when the whole, Canada, Europe, everything seems to be moving toward, you know, the right. And what do we do about it? How do we regain our freedom? So yeah, protests and were an essential part of it. The Take Back the Night one was from an older protest. It was a very classical one that's shown in all the documentaries where, you know, it's the candlelight march. That was really key. So a lot of it was from me watching those and saying, well, how do I get that feeling? So there were some things, like when you're doing a movie for years and years, you have a ton of footage. So the question is, how do you structure a movie like this? So the protests were one thing. The montages of women's hands doing different things were another thing. The newscasters came at the very end, and they were all scripted. So I got these out-of-work newscasters, and they were sort of pieced together to actually be the chorus, you know, and sort of wrap up what was happening. But yeah, the protests were very essential throughout the movie. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
We have time for just 2 more questions, and if we don't get to your question, Lizzie will be at the reception so you can ask her in person. Is there someone over there? Yep.
Hi. My question is, you said that the movie, it's still like valid today. So I was wondering, with everything that's going on right now and reflecting on your movie that has, you know, was released for so many years, how would you retell that story? What would you do differently?
You know, I don't know that I would do, you know, if we told you, mean if we did this, if we did it now?
Yeah.
You know, I would, that's a question I would ask everyone else, because now that's why one of the reasons I love being with you, because that's a question I would say, how would we do this differently? Because, you know, I think everything is so much more extreme right now. And my feeling is the movie would have to come from other places. The movie would have to come from Gaza. The movie would come from the Sudan. The movie would be global. The movie would be, you know, because right now with social media, we're all tied. You know, then there was really not any social media. You know, the little tiny bit of computer stuff was so basic back then. You know, with the FBI tracking Adelaide Norris, it was just so ridiculously basic. But I think now that this is the world, I think the difference, what we would do now is include the world. You know, if it were just women, it would be women around the world, but it's not just women. You know, it's how do we do that? What are the issues that affect all of us? So I would put it to the women who, or the men, who could put this together and somehow distill protest films that would work for the globe. And I don't know exactly what the issues are. Like when I approached this and I was asking the women, like, what are the issues that you care about most? And I was saying, is it wages? Is it about earning what men do? And it was no. The answer was, we are being raped and attacked. We don't care what we earn if we can be free of being assaulted on the street. And that was striking to me. That was, and today, you know, after Black Lives Matter, I was in Detroit, it was the same answer. It was the fear of being assaulted. And then you hear about women, like the woman in England who was walking through a park and she was killed by a cop. You know, this is non-ending, that women and men, but women mostly, are assaulted and killed. And this has not changed one bit. How does that stop? So I think it has to be put to people and asked as a question. It's not, I think it's not mine to answer, it's everyone's as a group to distill an answer. And I think that the equivalent of this film is being made every day and put out on the internet, but we don't see it necessarily, not necessarily as a film, as 3-minute pieces. But we don't know where to look because it's not advertised by a streamer, you know. It's just there's so much stuff out there, we don't know how to wade through it. But that's what I wish. I wish there was a way. So truthfully, if any of you see anything I should see, please let me know. I would really appreciate it.
We have time for one last question. There, someone up there.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think I saw your hand was up earlier. I'm sure his question's better. Oh, no. I'm so sorry.
Back the room feels lonely. Hi, thank you so much. I just want to say thanks to the Push Festival for showing this, and thank you, Lizzie, for being here. I saw this film when it came out, or in the 80s, as many of us maybe of my vintage did. Yes, yes.
Yay. Thank you.
Woo! And it's just such a trip to see it again. Like it's shocking to recognize how fucking relevant it still is. It's heartbreaking. But just amazing to see this. And the towers at the end was just like, bah! That was, I mean, you couldn't have known in '83 what was going to happen. And I guess my question, I mean, it's really a question that can't be answered. It's a question we're all asking ourselves. Like what struck me in the film, one thing that really struck me was that like the media, when it got taken over, everyone was watching the same thing. And we're just not doing that anymore. So it's like, I mean, you just said it. So how do we all come together? And in this moment when there's so much going on, and it's a shit show in so many respects. And how do we, I'm really asking myself, how do I connect with my fellow humans? We're all just like, we want to do something, and just feeling that that urgency. And yet you said it earlier, like who has ever put anything out in the world? And we all have to some degree, and that's part of it. But anyways, it's not really a question. So sorry, I took up a lot of airtime, but thank you so much. And if you have anything to say in response.
Yes, you just all should feel proud of everything you did and made and are doing and continue to do, because that changes the world for the better. And Thank you so much for coming here, and please ask me any other questions at this reception. I really do want to hear any and answer what I can. But thank you. I'm so honored by your presence.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, Am. Thank you, Am.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. And I just wanted to invite you all to the World Arts Center for a reception. Meet Lizzie directly. This is our last public event. It was great to partner with the Push Festival. So thank you. Thank you again for coming
And
tonight.
thank you to the Push Festival.